this is a concept that has been recently very much used by the literature. We try to look at this, at the processes of youth exclusion, starting from the assumption that youth exclusion is very much the product of exclusionary unequal power relationship. And we give a lot of emphasis in our project on the issue of power relations, and so on. Youth exclusion is also mediated and reinforced by the intersection of different axes of power, as I said before: gender, class, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientations, and so on. They actually interfere and should be considered when we look at youth exclusion and the processes of exclusion, inclusion, and so on. Of course, then, power structures, they operate across different dimensions: political, economic, social, and different levels. So the family, community level, so for instance, if we look at gender constraints to young men and women participation, we need to look at it taking into consideration different social dimensions and also different levels: the family, the community, the way young men and women participate in society, and more in general than the broader structural context. Youth exclusion is also experienced and constructed subjectively by young men and women themselves, of course. So what we would consider an exclusion might not be considered as such by the person involved. So for instance, young women may not perceive lack of participation in the labor market as exclusion if they conceive their role as getting married and not entering the labor market. Inclusion, because these two concepts, they go always together, it's also very problematic in the sense that we know that much of social research assumes the goodness of inclusion, but this goes together with a lot of implicit normative assumptions about how social life should be constructed. So we know that inclusion could be also very much disempowering and problematic. So for example, the inclusion of women into the labor market can be very inequitable if it doesn't go together with a redistribution of women's reproductive work. Just to give you an example, this is also very important in a context like Italy. We're not talking about only about the region. Also, the processes of social exclusion can also simultaneously incorporate situations of unequal inclusion and exclusion at the same time. So for instance, job creation programs for youth that do not tackle the structural market inequalities might also include certain categories of youth, but in a subaltern position or in condition of exploitation.